Today's guest just throw me a challenge. She said, every time we communicate now, we need to throw a John Wooden quote. And we'll come back to John Wooden and who he is properly in this conversation. But I will start then, Jensen. Success is never final. Failure is never fatal. It's courage that counts.
So happy to be here, Michael. Thanks.
Hmm. Do you say it's Churchill? Actually, I was looking at my notes I had on my Notion. It said it was a John Wooden I actually picked up at some
I
point.
think it's one of those quotes that Churchill wouldn't. I think Benjamin Franklin has been attached to that one. The one that I always remember is Churchill in the context of World War II. But yeah, I mean, powerful quote. And failure is a huge part of our business, a huge part of my story, your story, our story. So that's a great quote. Good place to start.
Well, there's also, obstacle is the way back to again, these people you just mentioned here, Churchill, John Wooden, they all Stoic philosophers as well and really believed in the Stoic philosophy. So we decided to have this conversation because we want to talk about a new paradigm for hospitality, and we want to talk about especially the business model that needs to be changed. And there's a lot going on, and we can of course spend hours talking about all the challenges. I think most of the audience are very aware about the challenges they're facing. What I really wanted to do today is, first of all, set the scene. It was great to hear a bit more about your background because you have an interesting background, 5 generations in hospitality, and you
We're
you
gluttons
you
for
tried
punishment, Michael.
you tried a lot. But just to give the audience a bit of sense of what is that, where are you coming from, what are you doing now, and what mission are you on?
Absolutely. Yeah, my story, I think a lot of people's story starts way before I was ever born. As you mentioned, fifth generation of chef restaurateur in our family. We opened our first restaurant in 1900 in Little Falls, Minnesota, called the Fond House. I've only seen pictures of it. It looks like a Wild West town, and it's the quintessential corner restaurant, if you could even call it a restaurant at that point. I think it was a saloon, basically, is what it
Mm.
was. And then that led to family being a couple generations in San Francisco, restaurateurs and barmen there. And then my dad's three younger brothers have 5 6 restaurants across 3 different states. My younger brother is also a chef, and we joke that his brothers and his sons are talented in the industry. Our dad literally can't boil an egg.
Mm.
So it's funny how much it's in my DNA. So it's always been something where I've never been told to get a real job because our family's been successful in big air quotes. Again, we're gluttons for punishment in this industry. But we've been drawn to hospitality. And so a lot of what we'll talk about moving forward, my framework now is thinking about my kids and would I want them to be the 6th generation of our family to be of service in this industry? And a few years ago, my answer was hell no, absolutely not. And a lot of it was the inequities that myself and our generation built into this industry. So I had to decide, do I
Mm.
want to do something different or do I want to triple down? I tried to walk away like you have and so many of us have many times, and it just sucked me back in. And so now the mission is really to kind of amplify the worth and work of those who feed their community, all of us, and amplifying the worth, the business model side, and the work that we do day in and day out is important. But the self-worth is probably the hardest part, Michael, to have people believe that what they're doing is meaningful and of value, because we tell
Mm.
ourselves all the time, you're only as good as your next plate up. Smile, it's part of your uniform. Leave your shit at the door, right? We perpetuate these tropes that are self-defeating so often. And so speaking of, in stoicism, I know that's something that's near and dear to you, is we are so emotional, rightfully so often, but sometimes to our own detriment because we have this dream, we have this vision. And for somebody to say that your restaurant, your idea, your baby is ugly, that hurts. And so we make a lot of bad decisions. I made a lot of bad decisions in the trajectory, even though I was talented. I knew how to run the numbers. I had all of the boxes checked that should make for a good business. I still struggled. So that's kind of the way that I'm approaching the industry now and trying to have a little bit of a perspective that I never had before. You mentioned John Wooden. At a certain point, I was that like hot shit chef who was on TV, on radio, in media all the time, name and lights, all of that. And I bought into that a little bit too much, and it put me on a steep trajectory, and then I burnt out. I could
Mm.
not be the caricature of myself, and I think a lot of people in the industry deal with that. Now what I'm doing is I still have ego. I still deal with that every day. I still am ambitious, but I can't go to the Hall of Fame as a player. I'm trying to have that level of impact as a coach now. So now I have to do it as on the sidelines. And what does that look like and feel like? So John Wooden is a great example of somebody who had a massive impact from the sideline. That's me.
And Jensen, so to give people a bit of context, what kind of work are you doing now actually to be on the sideline? In principle, when you say John Wooden is, how you're trying to get the best out of other people, because that John Wooden was a coach, basketball coach for a very
Yes.
famous team in the US, UCLA. And for people that don't know basketball, just Google John Wooden and you will totally get I can't, you probably remember better than me, but it's like he's won more trophies than anyone
11
else.
national titles. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Um,
the work that I'm doing is multifaceted. One of the things, Michael, that I realized is too much of our industry is siloed.
mm,
We very much are speaking different languages. So I recognized early on as I transitioned out of being the chef owner of restaurants, that was my work. That was my worth. And so now we have multiple businesses, now four different entities. So we have strategy consulting work that we do at a high level, and this is for growth concepts from inception that are, you're investing 1 million, 2 million to $5 million is kind of the sweet spot because we're expensive. It's $100 to $350,000 to engage in that business. That's why I do so much free content, because I want to really impart something of worth and value and kind of give a roadmap to my younger self, my young dumb self, to be able to have them have an opportunity. So that's why I do so much free content. So we have that consulting company. Literally, like last week, we launched a new company called How To Restaurant Consulting, that we're taking a lot of the big things that we do and scaling them down. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more, but that's a second business. Then we have this media business now, Michael, something I never thought I would do. We started in 2019 as just a little podcast called Best Served Podcast, and now we've produced over 500 episodes of shows. We have multiple different brands within the shows that we do. We're doing content production, white label. We're doing media and marketing for other brands. So that's a completely wild new space to be in. And then we have an event production company that's been very quiet over the last 3 years because events have just not been happening. But actually, my wife really runs that. She produces both kind of high end public facing stuff as well as a lot of things for nonprofits, especially for food access, childhood development, education, things
mm.
like that. So we're trying to be as vertically integrated into the things that it takes to kind of be a part of the hospitality industry.
Yeah, and I guess you're still in it then, especially with the events, because that's a tough gig. I know as well, running events, and because they are happening maybe 1 or 2 days, and all the prep and the after work is actually starting. It's like launching a restaurant when you only open for a couple of days, and then the show is
That is
over.
so true. We have an event coming up, which is a gala event, which will probably raise about $275,000 in one night. So big, high expectations, right? We're bringing in top chefs from around the city. And my wife, Betsy, her job is to kitten herd all of these creative entities. And it's like kitten herding with megalomaniacs who have knives. And so she does an amazing job. And part of my job is to like really rally the chefs and be like, what the hell are you doing? Get us your menu. Okay, now that I see your menu, let's really make this the greatest event that we possibly can. And one of the things that's cool about the events that we do is they do raise so much money, but also they create so much community. So like this event we have coming up, we've raised over the years over $4 million for this organization that
Mm,
helps underprivileged families with services that they need, and the culinary community has been a driving force for that. And I think we don't get enough credit for the altruism and the charity work that restaurants do. So you're right, it is like launching a new restaurant, and we have 15 different restaurants all with different motivations, different
mm.
expectations, different styles, different languages, again, like I
Mm.
said, we're siloed. So my job now is to be a translator for people who think they're speaking the same language, but are speaking very different languages. And that comes into play in events, to your point, in a way that a lot of people don't realize. So I appreciate you pointing that out. Betsy's gonna love that clip.
We'll make sure we make a clip out of that, Jensen. So you mentioned yourself, you mentioned the media company, all the interviews you've done, and in my preparation, I thought, it'd be really, really interesting because you learned something that I know that myself talking with people, you start to see patterning, you start to see that's interesting, that's what the best of the best are doing, that's not what to do, and so on. So on. What is like some of the key learnings you've had talking and interviewing all these people? Because it's suddenly very different position than being in the operation, solving problem, and asking questions about how they're solving and listening to them and actually begin, you begin becoming the translator of challenges.
You just said it, asking questions. It's the number one thing that I've learned is your ability to ask questions is the superpower. So when I
Mm,
was the chef, my job was to have all the answers.
mm,
All the answers. What's the best technique for this? What's the best ingredient for that? Who's the best source for this? What's the best inspiration and backstory and all of those things? Now my job is to ask all the questions, and I don't have all the answers. And anybody tells you they do, they're selling you something, right? They're fortifying their position. So the ability to ask questions and recognize those patterns and then be able to recognize smart answers and then be able to convince others that this is an answer that works for them. So we've been very monolithic. I mentioned we're siloed. We're also monolithic. The business model of a restaurant is not singular, but we've treated it singular. And we've all copied and pasted the exact same P&L and operating budget, the exact same prime cost dynamic, all of these things that were the way you're supposed to build a restaurant. I did that and I failed more than I succeeded. And I ran businesses, high end chef restaurants that dropped 11% to the bottom line, which is ridiculous. Fast casual concepts that drop 19% to the bottom line, which is how you scale a concept like that, and still failed because I was so singular in that thinking. So asking questions, that's the number one thing that I suggest that anybody who's looking to get into opening a restaurant, who currently opens a restaurant, has a restaurant, needs to really, really ask the questions that nobody else is willing to ask, that are challenging, that might have you question and doubt yourself, that might have you realize that you're doing a lot of things very wrong, and that's hard. It's really hard, Michael, to ask people to do that of themselves, to be a part of that process because it's personal and painful for them, but it's the only way. It's the only way. One of the things that I tell anybody who's opening a restaurant, well, I'll take somebody I worked with recently, Scott Shadden, who's a really, really, really talented chef who's been very successful running concept after concept. Opened his own restaurant in Denver, Colorado called Terra Denver. And I told him that he is going to second guess and doubt and question everything that he's ever been good at in the industry, because
mm,
all of a sudden there is no safety net. It's you. That's it. You are the bottom line. And so the decisions you used to be good at that people paid you well to make, you're going to fumble with. And it's going to really, really challenge you. And then all of a sudden, what you're going to do is you're going to overcompensate and you're going to be overconfident in decisions that you shouldn't be confident in, that you should be looking outside of yourself, outside of your experience, your knowledge, your own circles, and you're going to insert yourself in decisions that you maybe shouldn't because you're overcompensating for that. So it's this very, very personal journey that you're going to go through of self-doubt and self-confidence, and that was really, really hard for people. And Scott, at multiple times, is I just didn't know the questions to ask. I didn't understand the things that I didn't know. I had seen them happen. I had seen them work successfully, but when it was time for me to make that decision, I struggled with it. And the fact that Scott was so open to that, I know he's going to succeed, right? He may fail multiple times within that context of those micro failures. The
mm.
fact that he's open to that, that he realized that, even though we fought about it, like, to the point where I'm sure he wanted to fire our company multiple times. I just couldn't let go and just say, "Okay, well, you're paying me, so I have to back off." It's my job to sometimes get in the face of our clients or anybody in the industry because I know what it's going to mean if they do or don't allow themselves to be open to asking questions.
It's quite interesting. You touched a couple of elements. I really like the thing about asking questions, because I think also that's what, as leaders, often we think we can't be vulnerable. The ego comes in. You mentioned that in the beginning
Of
as
course.
well. We can't ask question, and actually our biggest job is to ask question. And I experienced that myself, and the business I'm involved in, actually having a diverse group of people, if they're advisors or whatever they are, that's asking you question that journey. It doesn't mean there's always that question is right, but that you should just take it on board and actually sort of tumble with the idea and pull yourself out of the engine. Say, why did he ask that question or she asked that question?
Mhm.
I'm disagreeing, but maybe there's something right about it, and actually explore it, because I think many of the problems we ran into as an industry because we didn't ask questions around our business model. I think you were
Yeah.
spot on when you said the copy page model. Well, we're just going to do what Starbucks and McDonald's have done. You're not Starbucks and McDonald's, so you can't do whatever they did,
Mhm.
because they also found their own algorithm of what is a good food waste. So good food waste in the United States for McDonald's is not the same as in countries in Europe. It's really
It's
different.
embarrassingly different. Here.
Uh,
You can learn from them, Michael. You should definitely learn from them. A lot of times, the small, independent, kind of rebel mindset of a lot of restaurateurs says, "Well, I don't wanna be corporate. I don't wanna be a corporate stooge. What they do, that's not me." And so they run too far away from some of the things that do in fact work.
yeah,
So both are a vulnerability. Copy and pasting the same old model is a major vulnerability. That's been exposed. And now we also need to recognize that sometimes going too far away from the scalable models that we see out there is also a vulnerability as well. So I think it's being able to, again, take in as much information, as much context, as much data, as much, insight as you can. You mentioned advisors as you possibly can, and patch that all together just like you would build a recipe, and take something that you're good at, the idea of menu development or building a recipe or building steps of hospitality. Take those skills that you have and apply them to the way that you build the business model. That's, I think, an important part of this is we think that the business is something that we're not good at because we're so great in the kitchen. We're so great behind the bar. We're so great at a host stand or table side. We think that that's what we're here to do. And the reality is that's the easy part. That's what
yeah,
you're naturally gifted at. The
yeah,
other stuff is the challenge. But we have a lot of skills that we do not apply, and it's hard. This comes up a lot when people ask me about job skills. There's been a lot of people, Michael, who've come to me and said, "I need to get out of this industry, but this is all that I know." Because so many of us, myself included, we get into this industry when we're 15, 16, 17 years old. Nobody
mhm,
becomes an investment banker at 17, right? And so we sometimes stay in that adolescent mindset for far, far too long, myself included. And so when people say to me, "This is all that I know," and I was like, "Well, tell me what you love about this. Tell me what you're good at. Tell me the spots in the restaurant where you find yourself because you just have that innate ability, that natural gift." And they tell me about these things, and then I give them context. Well, a tech company would love that because your ability to be hospitable and ask those questions of your guests to be able to give them a great experience. Imagine a salesperson being able to do that in the way that you do, and not just sit here and list off features and functions of this vertically integrated end-to-end solution that's optimized for blah 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 that a tech company does. Well, you have the ability to understand what people are looking for from an experience standpoint. That is an incredibly transferable and valuable talent that you have. And so that's part of it is we just don't understand the context of the gifts that we have, and we do not apply them to the business model. We run away from it quite often.
So you look at a lot of business models, and I'm always been very fascinated in what I try to bring into my roles, because very early on I was very lucky to meet somebody to learn me around the importance of in an individual business model for your organization. It's not an algorithm you're taking from McDonald's or Starbucks. You need to invent your own. You have to understand the metrics that drives it and the culture that you need to build to deliver that. So what, when you see a great business model, what is the science?
Mhm. That's a great question, and I don't have a good answer yet. I'm still taking in information on that. Here's what's the most unique part about a great business model is when I ask or push back on any part of it, that there's a thoughtful response. So again, it's asking questions. When I see something, I was like, this is an interesting business model. This is an interesting way to do service or to do online ordering or anything. I ask them why. Like, why did you do this? How did you end up getting to this point? And if they don't have an answer to this, then it's happenstance. And if they don't, the way you do anything is the way you do everything, right?
Mm,
Is kind of something that I think about a lot in restaurants. And so if they have good answers to the questions about the unique parts of the business model that are disruptive or new or unique or customized to their business, then I know that they're taking that level of thought and creativity at every point. What I think is most challenging from our perspective now, as somebody who has developed a lot of business models that varied by 0.5% for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, all the businesses that I created, even if they were different, they were really different by a half a degree. And I pretended, and we pretended like they were radically different and unique. The reality is they weren't. Now, what's starting to happen and needing to happen is every restaurant model has to be its own model. We have to start to buck the trends of this is fast casual. Whereas are you quick serve? Are you quick casual? Are you fast casual? Are you hybrid? Are you optimized for delivery? Is delivery secondary or primary to your business? Like all of these things are pretty important questions. Are people ordering off an app? Are they ordering from a touch screen? Are they ordering from a person? Is this a queued line where they're selecting items as they go, or are they ordering off of a menu? Are they selecting multiple items off of a menu to a person? All of these are very different downstream effects. The way that you brand and market, the way you position that business, the locations that you have for real estate, the size of the footprint, the culinary development, the price point, the food waste, the technology, the equipment, these are all different and need to be different. You may end up cross utilizing certain things and utilizing equipment or
mm,
technology that other types of business models do. Of course, you have to understand that each of those things that I just rattled off at you, those go through my head every time I talk to anybody. And if you don't have answers to those questions when I ask why do they order off the menu versus them ordering off of a touch screen, why do they select 3 or 4 things versus it being a preset item? All of those things change your business model significantly. And that's very different than anything we've done before.
do we, as I probably know the answer to this question, but I would like to
Ask it
hear you
anyway.
on
It's
it.
a good question then.
Do we actually, as leaders and operators in this industry, spend enough time of thinking and reflecting on the business model? And I'm not saying we need to take time out every week, 4 hours, and not doing, because we are really an action oriented industry, which is really our strengths. You saw that in COVID, how quickly things can change. At the same time, you also mentioned all the good and charity work that was done at the same time as there were people saving their businesses. But coming back to it again, do we really, in your view, take the time that needs to be thought about the future? It doesn't mean I'm not talking about a 3, 5 years plan, but I'm talking about the positioning of where you're going and actually start slowly evolve your business so you don't have to make these drastic changes as a pandemic will force on you.
Short answer is no, we do not. I remember for myself that I was such a good counterpuncher. We are
Mm,
so reactionary, and this is a strength. This is a strength. We are so reactionary. We are so in the moment. Unlike maybe any other businesses, you have to be in the moment because you have 30 seconds to get that scallop to the window. You have 20 seconds to be able to put a bev nap in front of that guest to know that they're marked. You have 15 minutes to reset a guest clock. You have 45 minutes, an hour and 15 minutes to turn that table. We are always thinking in these short snapshots, right? First course, second course. There's strength in that. We are in that moment. We are able to put out fires in real time, unlike any other business that I have ever seen. And so there's strength in that. What that means, though, is we spend all our time, effort, focus, money in that space, which means we are constantly in the shit. We are in the minutia all the time, Michael. And it gets really hard to see the forest through the trees sometimes and take a step back and get a little bit of a bird's eye view. We do not do that. I never did that. My superpower was being able to solve every problem instantaneously in real time. People would come to me and I was the most stoic there. I would say, I'm going to solve this problem no matter what it is, a guest problem, an equipment problem. The oven pilot light goes off, we fix it. The hood stopped working, we fix it. We run out of an item, we fix it. A guest has a complaint, we fix it. The wine chiller's broke, we fix it. All of it, Michael. So we're
Yeah.
really good at that. It just means that there's no bandwidth left. There's nobody who is spending any time or effort saying, why are we doing these things? Is it the best approach or is it just the way we've always done it? Which is my least favorite trope that we perpetuate. Anybody tells me, well, that's just the way we do it. I lose my mind, Michael. I absolutely lose my mind because I think it's a huge vulnerability. So we don't spend enough time and effort on that at all. My mom used to tell me something that I remember. She's of the generation that saw the moon landing as a kid,
Mm.
right? So it was very, very impactful for her. And something like the moon seems impossible to get to the moon. And if there's a problem out there, you must have to take these major, drastic, life or death actions and make those decisions in a second, right? The reality is to get to the moon, you have to make 10,000 corrections of 0.000001 degrees. That's how you get to the moon. And I always remember that because too often we overreact because, again, we're emotional about it. This is our
Mm.
dream. This is our vision. This is our baby. And a lot of times it's 10,000.00001 degrees.
Yeah.
The problem is we're stuck in that capsule and we need mission control. We need Houston allowing us to have a little bit of a vision of our overall trajectory. And that's where having that vision, having that why, having that mission is so important and being able to take perspective. And we just don't do enough of that because we're stuck in the capsule.
It's super interesting because, as you know, I'm really interested in what are the Mavericks, the best of the best doing. And actually, one of the first patterns I saw there was a clarity of purpose and direction, and it was continued development. And in the US, you have a brilliant organization. They even have written about how they do this. This is Singerman's in Ann Arbor, Michigan, that talks about visioning and the importance of that have for their organization and how they break down visioning from the organization, but all the way down to the individual employee in their lives. And now the whole visioning technique has become a way of helping communities, charities. It's even gone to Africa to Eskinoshi chocolate. It's really interesting. They have actually made a leadership, you can say, practice that's now involved into that. And it was really interesting. One of the things I was reflecting on is like what I've seen as well and really reflected on as I've been asking questions on my podcast show is also is that we live in an industry with long-term problems, systemic issues
Mhm.
we're solving, but we use short-term thinking to solve them, which exactly mean that
Exactly right.
you become very emotional decisions, you said, and therefore you're not really moving the dial. So 12 months later, further, you're
It-
still paddling around in
right.
the same problems. Is that like when we talk about problems, is there like an issue, Jensen, you would like to be solved? And what would that issue be? And what would it mean if we could solve that for the industry?
You mentioned Zingerman's, and shout out to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Some great things happening there. I think Ji Hae Kim, Miss Kim, who's also part of the Zingerman's family, a brilliant, brilliant restaurateur, somebody I've gotten to talk to and know. And it's all about the people. It's all about what I
Mm,
call those unsung hospitality heroes. We have spent so much time getting good at hospitality for our guests, that we leave none for ourselves. And it's the number one problem. And look, we've seen it externally. There's a labor shortage. The reality is there's a culture shortage at mass scale. Restaurants are not a great place to work, and it's been exposed. And now we're really reeling from that. We're grappling with what does that actually mean for our industry. And so that's the biggest problem that I see. And I didn't understand the responsibility of leadership. I did not understand that it was not my job to have all the answers and to be able to push us somewhere, to your point. I think when you have a strong vision, it's a destination on the horizon, and your job is not to push mud uphill to prove that your vision is a destination worthy of trying to get to, a goal trying to achieve. And we do that a lot in this industry. And everybody who's along for that journey is collateral damage. And so I struggle with that a lot. And it's one of the things with the how to restaurant consulting that we just spun off is I wanted to start to do those smaller individualized bits of consulting or strategy work or just one-on-one sessions with people or with my team. And so we started to think about what is the problem that we actually have in the restaurant labor business model. And there were lots of things. Well, our percentages are this. Well, we don't do benefits and pay. And we said, okay, well, we need to develop wages, benefits, culture, and education. Those are the four pillars that we believed in. And so we applied all these numbers. We have great ways of developing that business model. We can basically tell you now you're an employer of choice at XYZ level. And that was really valuable. But we did that on paper and we moved pieces around a chessboard. And that wasn't good enough for me. So I felt like I didn't ask enough questions. So Michael, I do what I do. I go on social media mostly and I ask questions. I ask dumb questions a lot. And I'm willing to have people go, well, obviously it's this, or why would you ask that? It's plain as day. But I ask those questions because I think the only stupid question is the one you don't ask.
Hmm.
So I've asked tens of thousands of dishwashers and bartenders and hosts and line cooks questions about what do you like or dislike about the hiring process, the interview process, resumes? What makes a great boss, a horrible boss? I've asked owners, what makes a great coworker, an employee? All of these questions, and we broke this down, and I'll have to send people to howtorestaurantconsulting.com and check out our blog because I broke this down because one of the things that came up was 75% of people were not showing up to interviews. So I said, let's take this micro problem. And we identified that there were three major issues that restaurants were having. Not enough people applied to jobs, not enough people showed up to interviews, and not enough people accepted jobs. I said, okay, fine. Let's attack those problems. And then we asked employees again, what are all these issues that you're having? Well, they felt like they weren't treated like humans, their time wasn't valued, and there wasn't clear expectations of the process. And in each of those three issues that the restaurant had and the three issues that employees have, we just look for the pattern. Where's the intersect? Where's the disconnect? So we created a new model for the interview process. And we had one of our clients, we worked on it with them. And so we're going to do a completely different hiring model. Of course, they were uncomfortable because they had never done that before in their past experience in restaurants. And we went to from 75% no shows to 88% of interviews completed
Hmm.
in a basic, like, we came up with this in 2 weeks. I was like, let's just do something different. Here's all this information that we have. And one of the main things that I did, and I did this because I wanted to personally touch the process. I did this for every single interview in the initial phase of the process. When my team fed me somebody was like, here's somebody we think is a viable candidate. I grabbed my phone, this thing right here, that has more computing power than the computers that got the first men to the moon, right here in our
Right.
hands, which we undervalue and underutilize all the time. And I
Yeah.
picked it up and I said, hey, Michael, I'm excited to be doing your 10-minute chat interview over the phone tomorrow. And I saw that you worked at Hospitality Mavericks. I think they do really, really great work. And I'd love to talk to you more about it. 2 o'clock tomorrow. And, see you then. That took me about 12 seconds and a little bit of give a shit.
Yeah.
The amount of people that showed up, and about 75% of the people that showed up made mention of that video. That took me no effort, Michael, to do, just a little bit of thought, because I wanted to treat them like a human. I wanted to not have somebody pick up your resume for the first time when they're talking to you because they have no idea who you are and you're just a piece of
Yeah.
paper, but they really want you to work here. And I wanted to have clear expectations. I'm gonna be talking to you. It's a 10-minute chat tomorrow at 2 o'clock. Set reasonable, clear, simple expectations. I'm the one you're talking to. You can see me. I'm a human. I care enough about you to be able to know where you've worked and tell you what time the interview is tomorrow and how long, and it's a phone interview. So those are the little things. That's like an encapsulation for me that I'm very proud of the fact that we can do work like that, because it means that my goal of amplifying the worth and work of those who feed their community is meaningful, because those people are not feeling like their work is valued, their worth is valued. And so that that's a way that we can solve a problem. And unfortunately, Michael, I've told hundreds of restaurateurs this, and the vast majority of them tell me stuff like, well, they're not going to show up for an interview, so why would I waste my time? I was like, well, you're right. You are manifesting exactly the outcome that you are putting forth,
Yeah.
and you're
And
going to
the
be right.
universe will and the universe will give you that. That's normally how it works.
It will reciprocate.
And it's really interesting how you also talk, because what I see you doing there as well, and I can tell a little bit story where I did something different. And at that time, there was not the camera didn't work on mobile phones, but I did something very different in the process because there was not people didn't go to the interview. But I'll come back to that in a second. It's really interesting how you take hospitality from the customer and start to give that to the employee experience as well, because you're actually saying welcome, like you will maybe send an email or text to the guest, we're looking forward to see you tomorrow. And some people actually using video today and say, hey, I'm Josh, your waiter tomorrow, we're great, looking forward to see you in the restaurant. Any question, just send us a message here, we have the table ready for you. And in
Love.
principle the same thing you do here. And I did something that meant actually, we did interviews over 2 steps in the place where I was operations director. And I said, I want to solve this problem where you had interview and then you don't get them to come back to the second interview. That was our problem. And we wanted the second interview because we wanted 2 people to look at this candidate. So we wanted a manager and an employee. And the
Right.
second interview was
Love that.
actually just walking around the workplace with the employee. The employee told them how the culture was there. And we had a little book called the culture book. You can have that before you make a decision, go home and read that. But we didn't did that second with all our great candidates. So we had like a rating system, and then they came out and I got that report every day. So I decided I'm going to call them the day after they've been for the interview. And then I'm Michael. I'm the responsible for the organization here. I heard that it was a really good impression. Is that I want to hear what your experience was. And I was sometimes told things like, oh my God, did that really happen? Did they really not
Right.
that they would let you wait for an hour, and they didn't communicate with
Right.
you, they didn't give you a drink, so then I could go back and rectify that hospitality experience because we were looking for that. And the best people of course thought, I'm not going to spend my time on this, it's going to be a useless manager. If that's the quality, because the first interview was always with the manager. And that also made the organization understand the importance of creating that experience from day one when people join to the day they end. That will be, somebody very senior, very interested in this. And that's not what
Mm,
I've in general have seen on the people journey. I don't know if you,
no.
when we think about people's strategy into the business model, we came from business model, but often I don't, we talk a lot about people first, but I don't see you haven't put your, as Stephen Pressfield would say, you haven't put your ass where the work needs to be done, because there's no strategies and there's no like clear process of what is that to make our people journey unique compared to others. I'm being very general here. Of course there's some that's doing a brilliant job on this, but in
You
general I
mentioned
see
fingerprints
that
and
missing
others.
link with the business model. I don't know if you see the same as well. Not really thought about. It's
Mhm.
an afterthought. We're just gonna invent it on the go.
Well, what you just mentioned, I think, is critical. You mentioned that you followed up after that first day and you learned a lot. You asked hard questions and it was uncomfortable. And you had to then have hard conversations with those managers or whomever has instilled that process. And they had to wait for an hour. We heard that all the time. You didn't value their time. Well, what if this person lives 6 miles away? They don't have a car because restaurants don't pay enough. So they have to take public transportation. They had to get all dressed up. So maybe they had to go pay to go get their hair done or their makeup done or whatever to feel like they were presentable professional. They also booked 3 other interviews while they were downtown because it's quite a trek for them to get down there. And now they have to decide, am I going to stay here for 45 minutes because my next interview is coming up in about 15 minutes? Do I leave? Well, that person leaves. Then what happens with another restaurant? This person is a flake. They're not worthwhile. They just took off from an interview. How unprofessional could you be? The reality is they're having to make decisions for their own life, their own livelihood. So when you follow up that next day, you're deploying a strength that we have in restaurants. If you drop food at a table, you don't not come back and check on them. You check on them to make sure they have everything that they need, that it was cooked to their satisfaction, that exactly they are having the experience that you've laid forth and said, this is the vision that we have for this. But you wouldn't follow up on an interview. Why? Why wouldn't you give that guest, that potential internal guest, the same respect and due hospitality that you would a guest? You're really good at that follow up to
Mm.
reinforce how right they were to decide to order that dish. How great that blackberry gastrique goes with those scallops. You were right. They were right. We now have more rapport. And we don't do that with them. And you mentioned the handing of the culture handbook. The reality is culture does not start when you have an employee that works for you, that now they have a W-2 coming their way. It starts from them looking at your Instagram, your website, the applying for a job on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
the first interview, the second interview, all of that. That's culture. And we have defined our culture as being lackluster to say the best. And we, again, restaurants are not a great place to work, is what people are telling us. So, what are we going to do differently? Apply the strengths we already have. Have some self hospitality, have some hospitality within the entire process, not turn people into bodies and hands because they're expendable and they're not going to show up for interviews. So, why put in any effort or care?
Yeah.
If you did that to guests, they would not show up for their reservations.
No. And it would be very
And
clear
so,
what would happen over time for you. And I think it's again coming back to that like positioning the employee journey as important as the guest journey, because else it will never be even. I think we've just been lucky that it hasn't happened before it did, in a way that the whole
you are
great
100%
resignation we
right.
talk.
Because we were the cool kids cycle from about I call it the Food Network effect, right? It's from, and I call it that because others have called it that. I did not coin that. About 2000, when I got into the industry, when Food Network and Bourdain and some of those people were starting to get some attention, we had this steep trajectory. We went from being misfits or the island of misfit toys and rebels and what Bourdain called pirates, for better or worse. We didn't find our purpose in the way that a lot of other people did. We didn't want the 9 to 5, the cubicle, the suit and tie, the college. We wanted something different. And I know when I found the kitchen, I was like, this is it. Like I found my people. And we went from that to all of a sudden, we were the cool kids. And I did not know how to handle that. And a lot of us didn't know how to handle that as individuals, and we definitely didn't as an industry. And so all of a sudden, I remember being invited to sit in the players area for Colorado Avalanche hockey games, or, hanging out with the players at after parties, things like that. This is too weird. This is not what I expected, and this is not what had happened for the first 5, 6 years of my career. But around, 2005, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, all of a sudden there was this boon, and we were the cool kids, and we didn't know how to handle it. And so we made a lot of poor decisions, and we started to value things that we shouldn't have. And now, quote unquote, kids these days are saying, well, you're the establishment now. So we went from being outcast to cool kids to the
Yeah.
establishment. We are the new cubicle and suit and tie. And we do not like the fact that kids these days are calling us out for that. And so we're blaming them and saying, well, they're not as dedicated or motivated. The reality is they're not willing to go through the same bullshit that we did and call it a badge of honor. They're like, that's stupid and toxic. Why would I do that? For what?
Mm,
What
mm,
vision? What are you offering me?
mm,
And so they have options, way more options. They're like, why would I go to a restaurant that's going to nickel and dime me down to $13 an hour, overwork me, not care about me through the interview process or any part of this process, and and then and then give up my not only my like livelihood, you're also giving a piece of yourself because it's such a creative expression as well. And then we blame them when they say, "You know what? I'm just going to go flip stuff on eBay, or I'm gonna take my family's lumpia recipe and sell them direct to consumer on Instagram. I don't need you as a gatekeeper for my culinary journey anymore. Thank you, chef."
mm.
That's hard for a lot of us to grapple with. So we have to like really, really come to terms with that. And again, we have superpowers. We have hospitality. I see so many other industries right now, Michael. I know you see it too, that are trying to learn how to be better at hospitality. You know, they'll
Yeah,
call it customer service and things like that. The best version of customer service is hospitality. It is the best version of customer service. And so many companies are trying to be hospitality. When we talked about Google, wow, look at the culture that Google has. It wasn't because they had bouncy chairs and foosball. That's not what they did. They were trying to create a culture of innovation. They were trying to create a culture of individuality within this machine. And the reality is, it was hospitality. You were
yeah,
making people feel special.
yeah,
Full stop. The end. That's what they were doing. I'm feeling special. I'm feeling heard. I get to express myself. That's what hospitality is. We do that better than technology companies. We do that better than construction companies. We do that better than car companies. Why don't we do that? We need to do
yeah.
more of that internally. That's what's going to create a very unique and different culture within restaurants. That's what's going to have people say, I want to work in restaurants. I want my kid to work at a restaurant for their first job. I left the industry. I want to come back because this is the type of culture I want to be a part of. I had never considered restaurants before. Now that I see that they invest in wages, benefits, culture, and education, and there's a real pipeline and trajectory to be a true professional, to be able to retire and with 2.5 kids and the quote unquote American dream or whatever it is that you want out of life, you're going to see people that go, I hate my 9 to 5 job and cubicle. I would love to work in an industry like that. And all of a sudden we're going to be a pillar of both culture and commerce in our communities that currently we're not, and we could be.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think it was Danny Meyer that said that in business and life, the only thing that really matters is how you make other people feel. Something in that down that
I love
road
this. We're just
there.
gonna quote. How about Maya Angelou? People forget what you did and what you said, but they'll never forget the way you made them feel. We could
Yeah,
do this all day, Michael. I love this. We just have the whole episodes where we do nothing but quotes back and forth. My
yeah.
dad, my brother, and I do that with movie quotes. We get together. It's just like one run-on movie quote. Betsy says, "I have no idea what you guys are talking about." It's hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's hilarious as well, and I think like another of those, I call the mini university as well because quotes are very powerful if you actually think about the quote and just think, "Oh, that's cool," but actually think about what was actually the intention behind that quote, what kind of reflection has gone into that quote. A couple more questions before we run off. Your top advice for leaders out there trying to build, a great business, but also be a force for good in the world today. What is the
Mm.
top advice you would give them away?
Ooh, man. Start really small. Really, really small. I myself included, I think we are so ambitious. We so want to build the next great growth concept, this idea that's going to change or revolutionize the game, and have that on the vision board, have that be a part of the mission. But start really small. Find that one place, that one community where you can make an impact. Find that one or two other people that truly believe in the same vision that you have and really try and create culture with them. So I would say have this big macro vision, change the world, change the industry, change yourself, and then go really, really small. And what is the smallest amount of change and progress that you can make? And that's really hard. I struggle deeply with that, Michael. I'm such a futurist and visionary that I forget to take the first step.
Yeah,
And I think
I love
that's
that.
an important and that's
I love
important
that,
part.
and
It's
that's really important. What is 20% that gives you 80% now? What is the smallest step you can do to progress that 1% today? And I think we often, as entrepreneurs, we forget that we get hung up on what it could be, but you actually need to deal with what's happening right here today as well. Where can people check out all your great works? The amount of interviews you've done, the all the free content, and if they want to connect with you, what's the best to do?
Mhm. I love just email me or DM me directly, Jensen at bestservedcreative.com. Ryan Reynolds said that I'm weirdly available. I love that quote because there was a point where I am so busy, I'm getting inundated all the time. Like literally, I'm sure as soon as I turn my phone back on after this interview, I'll have 112 emails and 16 DMs on Instagram and 4 comments on TikTok. But I respond to everything. Everything. It is something that I like truly, truly believe in. If you comment on one of my posts on social, I will like it, I will respond to it, it's important to me, and so, email me directly, I'm weirdly available, I'll find a way to get back to you, and then on social, I'm really active, so Best Served Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, you find me there at Jensen Cummings is where I'm putting up a lot of stuff as far as what's happening across the industry today. And then as far as our websites, bestservedpodcast.com, you can find some great blog posts written by unsung hospitality heroes. We pay $86 an article for anybody in our industry. I've had servers, bartenders, line cooks write articles. That's more than some of the periodicals pay for professional writers to write. So it was important for us to invest in people and then how to restaurantconsulting.com. Definitely go check out that article on flipping 75% no shows to 88% interviews completed. That's a really, really strong kind of snapshot of our approach. And there's a couple little small services like we're starting to do like one-off strategy sessions for people and we do some business assessments, so new business assessments and existing business audits. So we're spinning off some smaller services I mentioned. How to Restaurant Consulting is the spot for that. So those are some of the top places to connect. I'm everywhere though. I'm omnipresent, Michael.
Good, good, good. We'll put all some of all that in the show notes for people as well. Jensen, thank you for taking the time to come on the show, share your insights around business model, the importance of strategy, stepping out of the box to see the future, sending you and the team power and energy for the journey ahead.
Michael, thanks for the work that you're doing. I mean, all of us have more courage to be mavericks because people like you are out there, like championing, being willing to put your voice out there. It's meaningful, and sometimes when you're in the podcaster world, when you're in the entrepreneur world, it's quiet, it's lonely because you're out here in a box trying to make a difference. So I appreciate you, and I know your audience appreciates you as well, and appreciate them for tuning into what you're doing because they're out there being willing to look outside of themselves, and that's that first little step that changes anything. So thank you to you.
Thank you, Jensen.